Welcome to the Once a Cowboy, Always a Cowboy podcast, where you hear the history of Chaney football from the unique perspective of Coach Ron Berdis. So, when we started talking about this a couple months ago, I think the appeal for me was that, you get to a certain point in your life where you kind of think nostalgically and you look back fondly on certain memories. And, I think from being able to have so many of my family graduate from Chaney and go to school there and, being able to coach there with you, I know a little bit of the history. And I think it's very unique, right? The first 80 years of the program, up until you left, there were 4 head coaches. And, when we started talking about this, it was really about, not for entertainment, but just kind of documenting history. And because I feel like once there's a certain group of people that are gone, that's lost. And those we can look at newspaper articles and yearbooks, but you have that unique experience and perspective that really, only you and Ed Matey had, right? Guys who played there and were head coaches there. And that's unbelievable.
Oh, it was a unique experience, especially the fact that my dad played there and had such great success there and was revered by the first coach, Coach McFee, and countless stories of my father as a player. And when I, having 3 sisters that all went to Ursuline, and that's where my mother wanted me to go, and my father just kind of took a back seat on that decision, but there was no decision for me. It was, I genuinely do not want to go to Ursuline. I want to go to Chaney, and consequently, going to Chaney and playing for Red, I used to get teased, especially in my senior year, that I was the son of Steve. As a matter of fact, my closest friends that's what they would refer to me as. And it wasn't a burden. It was a compliment as far as I was concerned. So, going into Chaney as a sophomore and actually being introduced to Red Angelo by Ches McFee was really a surreal moment. And, certainly at that point I didn't think that I would be the head coach at Chaney. I mean, I didn't even enter into the thought process. But
so, when we first started talking about this, I said, what's kind of the comfort level, the thing that you're most comfortable talking about to kind of start this off? And you said your dad, and I think that would be a great story to hear about, because there again was on the first undefeated Chaney team in 1929, and you also said Red Angelo. And so, that's where we're going to kind of start now, is just kind of look at the history of Red Angelo and hear from your perspective. And here again, right, why is it unique? A lot of guys played for Coach Angelo, but you played for him, mentored by him, and then walked in his shoes down the line as the head coach. And so maybe you could just start by telling us a little bit about him, from how he influenced you and other players.
Well, I think anybody that listens to this would attest to the fact that the influence that Red had on not only his players, but I think anybody whose lives he touched would all, point in the same direction, that it was life-changing. I mean, he was just a special person that could hit the buttons in you and make you want to do things that you never thought you possibly could do. I could genuinely say that, at least from my perspective, I wanted to play for him. Okay, certainly Chaney was special, and it will always be special, but it was to impress. It was to impress Red. That was the hold he had on his players, and testimony to that would be, when I was 50 years old playing pickup basketball in the gym, and Red would walk in, I'd up my game because he would be watching, So just a special human being that epitomized toughness and I guess what every football player aspires to be.
Mm-hmm. And so, looking back through doing some research for this, he was a second head coach in Chaney history from 1954 to 1970, and I noticed that he was an assistant from 52 to 54, so 2 years prior to that. YSU Hall of Famer, Curbstone Coaches Hall of Famer, Chaney Football Hall of Famer, Rayin Hall of Famer, 4 city titles in 65, 66, 68. And so did he have any influence on you as you graduated, went to college and played, and then wanted to pursue coaching? Or was that just a passion you had? So was there an impact from his influence on you?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. He was instrumental in me choosing Mount Union. I mean, Red would always try to oversell his players. Mm-hmm. Okay, when the MAC schools would come in, and recruiting was different back then, but and Red was gospel to these guys that came in. So whether it was Elliot Uslack or Howard Wires, these MAC coaches that would come in, Red would know in advance, obviously, and he'd say, "Hey, Ron, wear an extra sweater tomorrow, and when you meet him, stand on your toes and grip his hand." And you're sitting there thinking, well, you know what? There's no way I'm going to get recruited by a MAC school, as a 5'10", 170-pound guard linebacker. But you did what he told you to do, but getting back to him being influenced as far as me going to Mount Union, yeah, I mean that when they came in, he directed me in that area. So he was definitely influential as far as that was concerned. But as far as leading me into coaching, anytime that there was a break or whatever, you come back and you visit. And whether it was to play basketball, pick up basketball, or just to go run with Red. And sometimes you might not feel like running, but he would insist, hey, let's go jog. And you'd take off through Mill Creek Park and go. But what it did was it just kept building on the relationship that you already had as a player, and you became friends and confidants, and certainly when the opportunity for me to come to Chaney as an assistant rose, I confided in Red and conferred with him, and he said, absolutely, good move, go ahead and do that. And then when the opportunity came as the head coach, he was my main guy. I mean, he went to Ed, and he went to Alex Murphy, who was the principal, and he went to Mel Katsoulis, who was the superintendent, and he lobbied for me, and to know that he was in my corner and he wanted me to be the next head coach, that meant a whole lot to me.
And so, that was one of the things that I kind of wanted to ask you. So when you took over, would he come around? Was he visible at that time? What was that kind of like when you stepped into that role?
Well, it's kind of like when, and to answer your question, he did come around occasionally. He'd come maybe just to jog the halls or whatever. But make no mistake, every player that I coached knew Red Angelo, knew about him, knew what he stood for, and knew the type of coaching, if for no other reason, the influence that he had on me and how it came out in how I coached. Would I ever claim to be a chip off the old block, so to speak? No. Everybody puts their own slant and their own phase on it, but was I influenced? Tremendously. Probably everyone that coached with Red, against Red, would tell you the same thing, that he made his mark on preparation, off-season, in-season preparation, and he was a stickler on fitness and conditioning, and that carried over and just added to the guys that played for him. You better be tough and hard-nosed or you're not going to play. So
everybody that I've talked to or listened to, that's always one of the attributes was the physical fitness piece of his teams, of his players, of himself. What was that preparation like? See, I've had the opportunity to kind of hear some of these from you, sitting around a fire or listening. But what was some of the preparation that you guys would go through, either in the summer, getting in shape, or during doubles, to kind of get fit and ready to play?
Well, there was non-contact period. I mean, that was adhered to then. So in June, when school let out, we would go on our own to Rock Ridge and meet in the morning and time up and condition. But Red would always be sitting on the hill. And he'd get word down, do this, do that, do whatever. But he stayed within the rules. And in the jumping back to the off season, you didn't go to study hall. You came down and took gym. Mm-hmm. Okay, so if you had two, three study halls, you led 2 or 3 gym classes. And again, Red, it wasn't like he'd take off and say, "Go ahead, you're on your own." He'd be there, but you'd lead the calisthenics and the laps and everything else that was going on, and we'd condition all year round. I mean, there was no start in January. I mean, season ended, you're in the weight room and you're conditioning.
Yeah. So, was there any any of those things that you did as a player that you continue to do as you were coaching? Some of your warm ups, some of your agility, some of those things that you integrated in.
Oh, absolutely. One thing that, and this occurred my senior year in high school. Red got this megaphone, and he had it clipped to his belt, and it would be just opportune times where he would just start bellowing into the megaphone saying, "Green Bay grass, you've got 40," and you just drop whatever you were doing. You could be in the middle of hitting a sled, you'd stop and just start chopping, and he'd hit the whistle, and you'd go down, bounce up, keep chopping until it ended. So I'm not suggesting that we did that in particular, but we did things similar, based on that, like hitting the sled and releasing and going downfield and getting blocks. I mean, there are so many things that practicing late. I mean, many a times, like when I'd go to the shop and try to turn the spotlight onto the field to get some light on the field through the trap door on the third floor, Red would have parents turn their car lights on, and we'd go sometimes. So, there probably too many things to mention, but certainly there was no one that was going to out fourth quarter us.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that, like I said, everybody talks about, just the physical fitness, the toughness, the mentality of, going to outwork. And I think you probably, I think that was what you always hung your hat on as a head coach. When you were playing Division I, Division II school teams and you had 35, 40 guys, that's what it was.
Yeah. Well, and again, that's who Red was, okay? And all of us that aspired to be like him was a compliment. I mean, it was just maybe an unachievable goal. You're saying, he epitomizes toughness and conditioning, and you chase that, but I don't know that anybody could. I mean, that's how much I think of him, and I think that. No one ever truly got there. Ed might have been close, because Ed was a pretty tough guy, but Red was the toughest man that I know.
Yeah. So one of the things that I was kind of thinking about, Red Angelo's impact on you, and then your impact, as you started coaching in '87 and through the '90s and through the 2000s. What does or what should Red Angelo mean to the players that you coach? So maybe they didn't get to see him and meet him, but by proxy, what legacy is there?
The greatest compliment that my players ever paid me, and there's two parts to this. One is a number of them, have said to me, you've told us how much influence Red had on you as a player. Do you know how much influence you had on us? And when you hear that, you kind of think, yeah, okay, yeah, I do. But it's it's almost mind-boggling because of how much you think of the person that they're comparing you to. So the fact that those players felt that, or indicated to me that you should know that, okay, was certainly special, and I lost my train of thought.
Yeah, I mean the fact that you kind of replicated or recreated that experience that you had, and those guys saying, "Hey, you're kind of, Red Angelo to us." That same relationship, and that's kind of what that legacy. Maybe they didn't meet him, but they kind of had that same value.
Yeah. Red, when you asked, did he come around? He'd come around, and like I said, maybe just to jog or whatever, I remember him saying, "I'm going to change in the back room," and I said, "This is your gym, I said, "You change wherever you want." And I said, "Your locker's still there." I said, "It'll always be your locker." And I said, "So use that." I said, "Whatever you want to do." And he said, "No, hey, Ron, that's your locker now." And actually, I still have it. I still have it in my garage. And the family, when Red passed, actually gave me his sideline jacket, and it's hanging in that locker.
Yeah. That's amazing. That's awesome. So, what I guess because of how he impacted you, was there ever a feeling of coaching in his shadow, or that same, I got to pick my game up on the field because Red's watching. I got to pick my game up in 8th period gym because Red's watching. Now I'm the head coach. Was there maybe a little pressure, or that you put on yourself possibly?
Oh, absolutely. And again, I would never run to him and say, "Hey, what are we going to do?" Not that I didn't value what he thought, but I just thought that would be a sign of weakness, but when we started and we struggled the first couple of years, his advice would be simple and to the point. "Hey, Ron, hang in there." And he was a stickler for the saying, "Stick and stay, and it'll pay." That's what we did. And I'd be remiss if I didn't say that I asked him for advice many a times. And his direction was usually the same, and it would be, you'll figure it out. And because I think, he wanted you to put your own spin on it.
Yeah, and I remember in the coach's office, which was also the locker room there, that saying, "Stick and stay and it'll pay," hanging up on the wall. And that's something that my son has heard me say, because it's a life truism, right?
True.
It is true. And we were talking this past week, as I was kind of looking over just the statistical career of Coach Angelo, and starting in 1955, ending in 1970, and you kind of struggled your first 3-ish years before you got it going. And, you know, Coach Angelo's career record was kind of like a tale of two careers, right? A first half and a second half. You know, he started off going 1-6, 2-7, 2-7, 1-8, 2-7, 1-5, 1-7, 1-5-3. I'm sorry, 1-7-1, 3-6, 4-4-1, and then it takes off. And so it's something to the tune of 15, 51, and his first 8 years he was 13, 53, and 6. 13, 53, and 6. And in his last 8 years, he was 51, 15, and 4. So we were talking, and I said, in today's game, in today's, the way things are, he wouldn't have made it. And all those things, the kids that he impacted, the Hall of Fame career, wouldn't have happened. And thoughts on that?
He the first half of his career, he was laying the groundwork for toughness.
Mm-hmm.
There's no other way to say this other than he was just kicking ass and taking names. I mean, he was beating kids up, and I don't mean literally, but maybe to some degree, and it was just no nonsense. I mean, he was lining up with the kids. He was putting on gear and scrimmaging.
Yeah.
They used to have an all-star game. The Trafficant played in the Old Timers at South, and he'd get ready for that at the end of the season. This was prior to me coming there as a player. So he was in his 40s then, and he'd have the players holding bags and whatnot, and the last couple of weeks of the season, he'd be running, doing cross body blocks and shoulders and sticking people, and it was. As a matter of fact, just the off-track side note, I could remember us practicing in it in the summer, and it was just brutal hot, and we were doing sweep drill, and both guards pulled unbalanced line, and he was in his run it again, and we just kept running it again, and Billy Torek was the other guard, and he said, no, that's not what I'm talking about when you pull, and he said, run the play, and he jumped in, and he no shirt on, just a pair of coaching shorts and coaching shoes, and Jerry Sanchi was the quarterback, and he said, run the play, and Jerry's looking at all of us like, is he really going to pull and go downfield and get another block? And Red turned to him and he said, hey, Junior, I said run the play. So he did, and that's exactly what he did. He pulled, and the poor sophomore that was downfield holding a bag that he probably ran over. I could just imagine the terror that he experienced. But anyway, that's who he was, and that's what he did. And he used to tell us, hey, when I was losing, people would put their arm on my around my neck and say, hey, Red, you're a good guy. He said, bullshit. He said, I don't want to be a good guy. He said now they won't even scrimmage us. And that's where he wanted to get it. I mean, because the bottom had fallen out in the late 40s, early 50s. Chess was getting older. He was there for 26 years. And, I don't know what the dynamics were as far as getting kids out or whatever. And so Red comes in as a ball of fire saying, hey, this is the way it's going to be. And kids were like, I can't do that. Mm-hmm. And Red's attitude was, those who stay will be champions. Mm-hmm. Okay. So, stick and stay, it'll pay the whole 9 yards. And, I'm sure there's some guys from the early year that are still around that might have. I never ran into anybody that would have would be a naysayer as far as what Red did, but kids just weren't coming out, and he was. One of his early players was Frank Ciccatello, who ended up being partners with Joe Namath in Bachelor's 3 because they played at Alabama together. And Chick would come in. He was in this hotel business, but he would come in one time a year, and it would be buzzing for like weeks. Hey, Chick's coming next week. Chick's coming next week. And he'd run the practice, and it would just be insane. Now, by the time I was a senior, Chick stopped coming. There was always the threat that, hey, you know what? Chick's coming in a couple of weeks. You better up your game. So everybody would worry about Chick coming. But like I said, my senior year at least, and I don't think my junior year either, did he come around. But he was definitely coming in, and like I said, he'd put those guys through nightmares. I mean, it was crazy.
So it was kind of, that philosophy of,
those who stay will be champions,
right? And weed out.
Yeah. Oh right? Yeah. Oh yeah.
Weed out.
Yeah. You're talking about. They're lining up against Niles back there that were the kingpins, and maybe getting beat 50-0 sometimes, and dressing 20 guys, maybe,
yeah,
because kids couldn't hang, and Red would try to promote guys to come out. Some of the kids that would want to play Sandlot, okay, Red would give them old helmets and shoulder. I mean, you get sued now, but he'd give them old helmets and shoulder pads and say, "Hey, you guys go and kill each other on the weekend, but remember, we're always open for business. We'll take you." Again, it came down to the philosophy: those who stay will be champions, and that's what he'd adhere to. And once it started to click, it just took off.
Yeah, it did, and that's where, in '64 he goes 7-1, in '65 undefeated, in '66 8-1, 6-2-1, 5-2-1, 8-2, 4-3-2. So, certainly, lots of success.
And putting kids, now, was it the chicken or the egg that came first? Because a lot of those guys went on to play major college football and play it well. And I'm here to tell you that every one of those guys, from Dave Brungard at Ohio State and Alabama, to Mike DeNiro at Texas A&M, to Red's son Louis at North Carolina State, and Phil in the MAC conference with player after player, they'll all tell you the same thing. The reason that they had success in college was because of Red Angelo.
And so, certainly how his players viewed him, how you view him. I guess one of the things that I was kind of interested about, how would his peers at the time, right, the other head coaches, how would they have viewed him?
Yeah, it's interesting that you asked that, because I was just reading the article when Red passed, and they talked to Don Butchie, and Don talked about his affinity, Red's affinity towards conditioning, and what a good friend he was. I think there was a tremendous amount of respect from the people that I've talked to that coached against him, and like he said, like I told you earlier, that like he said, when we were losing, I'm a great guy, and now that we're winning, no one, I'm not worth a heck, but he preferred it. Obviously, he preferred it that way.
Yeah, the old saying, everybody wants to see you do good, but never better than them.
Right.
Right. So what I guess something historically that would interest me, what was the City Series like at the time of that would have been the City Series. What was it like during Red's time?
Ursuline and Mooney were a part of it then.
Right.
And Ursuline and Chaney was a tremendous rivalry.
Mm-hmm.
There were some controversial games, simultaneous catch. That was the difference. A number of contests that went to both sides, and I think that was because how that stemmed was there were a number of West Siders that were that maybe drifted to Ursuline, and there was that rivalry. Case in point, Dick Angle.
Mm-hmm.
Dick Angle grew up and was friends with the Mateys and Lutzy, and he went on to have a great career as a player and a coach at Ursuline, and the other guys went to Chaney. But there was, I remember as a kid going to just a packed South Stadium, and and the game ending up 6-0, or maybe even 6-6 tie, and but it was a great rivalry. The city and another aspect of that is every year they'd have a preview, and where and it was at South, and I'm not going to be absolute about this, but I want to say it might have been right before I came that they stopped that. But you'd play a quarter with every team in the Still Valley.
Oh, wow.
And it would be this football, bizarre is not the right word, but like smorgasbord of I mean, it was a great venue. I mean, if you think about that, I mean, you're getting a taste of everybody that you're going to play in that conference.
Yeah. And so who was in the conference at that time?
It would have been Ursuline, Mooney, Chaney, Wilson, Rand, East, South.
Okay.
7 teams.
Okay. And not to sidebar here, but North was North?
Oh, North.
Okay.
Yeah, North.
Okay.
Too.
Yeah.
So it would have been an 8-team league.
Yeah.
Which was a nice league.
Right.
I mean, but that's, and I guess maybe towards the end, right? some of the schools were less competitive than they were, but I think all of them had some success at one time, So it was a good league, but I think enrollment started to wane in some of the schools, and so it kind of dissolved.
Okay, and where would the games be played?
It was either South or Rand.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
And they would alternate the home team.
And would it be on, for a while there we were playing on Thursdays, we were playing on Fridays, we were playing on Saturdays in the 90s and 2000s. What would that kind of been a similar setup?
Yeah, it was predominantly Friday night, and I want to say it was like a 8:00 start.
Late.
Yeah,
wow.
Yeah. It was. I'm trying to remember as a kid going, and I'm pretty sure it was like an 8:00 start. But both of those places, Rand and South, were both great places to play.
Yeah.
I mean, they'd fill up the stands and the side of the hill there.
Yeah, it's and Rand is the host field for the city teams now, and I know there's always talk about South Fieldhouse or different things coming back. And you mentioned how the tide started to turn, and when maybe you started to keep some of those West Side kids, right? So you mentioned Coach Angelo, who was my head coach when I was at Ursuline, but St. Brendan's, right? All those guys would go to Ursuline, but was there a reason that maybe some of the St. Christine's, St. Brendan's kids started going to Chaney, or was it just a natural occurrence, or what do you think happened there?
Well, I think part of it, certainly a large part of it, was your Uncle Red.
Mm-hmm.
He was not only the coach at St. Brendan's, but he later on, he actually, I mean, before he even coached for me, he was helping Red either with scouting or whatever, and then Ed as kind of like a part-time guy, there's no question that he was instrumental in steering a lot of kids, and I think Ursuline was pricing themselves out of the market too. They weren't, I can remember as an 8th grader at Holy Name, would have been Carey.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, probably.
Coming in and just meeting with the 8th grade football players and saying, you can all come to Ursuline for nothing. And I don't know what tuition was then or any of that, but the flaps on my ears went down. Because I didn't even want to go to the meeting because I knew where I wanted to go.
Yeah.
But some kids might not have been able to afford going there, and that's speculation. I don't know, but there's no question that Red Saunders and Posey and I can't think of the guy from St. Christine's were pushing kids in the direction of Chaney.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the things that what's so interesting to me is being an Ursuline graduate and having played there and experienced that tradition and how rich that tradition is and still is, but looking at the head coaches throughout time, I think there were 15 in the time period that we're talking about, and there were 4. at Chaney, and that's where, to me, it's that legacy. I think with Chaney that is so different is you have that small amount of people that were in leadership there, right? And then you leave, you retire 2007, right? That was
6 was my last
okay.
year, yeah.
So, and then from that time, I think we're at 4 head coaches since, with a hiatus, right, where the program was down. And I think there's just a disconnect from where we are today and where everything came from. And I guess my point is, you don't have that with some of the other schools, right? They're still kind of plugged in. There's still people that are there that have always been there that carry on those traditions, and that's where I think Chaney's a little different, to kind of keep this and still revisit it. So one of the things that I wanted to ask was, for guys who played for you, what philosophies did you take from Red and apply to your coaching days? And what I mean, like, actual X's and O's. Was there some plays that you ran, some things that you did that either as a player, or that you liked, that you brought to your time coaching?
Yeah. To answer your question, yes. And probably, I didn't speak at many clinics. But I always said, and I always told you guys, that if I did, I would, the subject matter would be how to make your offense a sweeping success. Because Red, if there was a favorite play, and there was, actually there was 2. One was a right, sweep right, and the other one was sprint out. Okay, we obviously used a lot of formations, and we used motion and the tight end alignment and whatnot, and blocking schemes changed because we were zone, and Reds was the old Green Bay sweep. I mean, it pulling 2 guards, and it was designed just like Lombardi drew it up. I mean, you're kicking out, leading through, and your fullbacks leading, and we pretty much were telling our tight end, get us the corner, we'll kick out that primary contain, and our back will make the cut, and telling the quarterback, get him the ball as quick as you can, as deep as you can, and let them run the daylight, which was the philosophy of the Green Bay sweep, and which was, Red was a big Vince admirer and follower. When we came out to play South for the city championship my senior year, I could still see him on one knee attaching a Green Bay Packer name to every one of us as we ran by, Green Bay grass. That was the drill, as far as X's and O's, I would say that would be the biggest influence, and we sprinted out also. I mean, obviously, with different formations. He was an unbalanced guy. I mean, that's what he believed. You were allowed to crack back then. He'd moved me from guard to what he called a Michigan tight end, and put me as the extra guy on the end, like we did with the tight end, to try to get that quick corner, or he would split me out wide and just tell me to come down and level inside, and we did this also. our quarterback my senior year, one of my best friends, Jerry Sanchi, he had one of the few. There were the Big Mac hits, and then there were the super hits. Red would have charts up, and Sanchi got a super hit on a South linebacker after he tossed on sweep and led, and just picked this scrape linebacker and three-pointed, put him on his back, and Red was pounding his fist and jumping off the ground saying, "Good go, that's a super hit."
Yeah, I remember you mentioned earlier the sweep drill, right? We would always start practice when I was coaching for you. We'd always start practice with either perimeter or sweep drill, right? Same thing, but just how you term it, you know?
Yeah, exactly. And he put 30 stand-ups out there, and you'd run the sled, and it was a smaller sled, but you'd run the sled forever, and then you'd release, and you'd go down and you were allowed to cross body then, so you cross body block, and he'd be up on your tail to get up and find another one.
So I got a couple quotes here, probably from the article that you mentioned earlier, and I just wanted to maybe get you to react. And one of the things that you said was from Coach Butchie, but this one's from Ed Matey, and he said, Matey said there were no favorites with Red. The big thing about Red was that he considered the team his family. Everyone was treated the same. When you make a tackle, there's no jumping around. You were happy to just make the tackle.
Absolutely. Ed, and I recall that. Ed summed it up very well. That's how it was. If anybody was jumping up, it was Red. I could recall there was a player named Woody McMullen, and we were running a punt. We had a punt return, and the wall was set, and the back was running up the alley, and Woody peeled around and just erased the kid. I mean, and it was right in front of Red, and I was a sophomore at the time, and just complete. How the kid lived is beyond me, because it was one of the biggest hits I've ever seen. And I think everybody instinctively just looked to Red to say, should we be like overreact to this or whatever? But Red would hey, Woody, that's a good go, and and pounding his fist in his hand and jumping off the ground, and but yeah, there was no celebration or that type of thing, and it was that was your job, and when you did it, not only should you do it, but you should have fun doing it.
Yeah.
And that's what it was.
You mentioned Dave Brungard earlier. I'll give you one more quote. And he said, we all played hard because we wanted to earn his respect. He would pat you on the helmet when he felt you did something exceptional and say, "Good go, boy." All of us wanted that tap on our helmet from him, so we played for each other.
That's a fact. All of us, everyone wanted that good go. I mean, if you got that, life was good. I mean, and I'm going to go out and say there was nothing about fear. I don't think that I ever feared Red. It was just, there's no other word but respect, and I would go on a limb and say that most of his players felt that too. certainly I'm not saying that you welcomed his wrath. You didn't, I mean, but yeah, I mean, firm, fair, and consistent. That's what he was. I mean, he was firm, fair, and consistent. And yeah, the pat on the helmet or the good go was more than enough reward. As we sat back in our alcoves before the game and drank our blackstrap molasses and wheat germ, and that he put us all. Yeah.
He was ahead of his time. Wheat germ. That's one of the.
You had everybody in their locker. You had vitamin C, you had wheat germ, and you had honey or blackstrap molasses. And that was in season, off season. As a matter of fact, on the bus, there was never a sound on the bus going to a game. Coming back, you could sing and do whatever you want. Not do whatever you want, but you could celebrate. And we would always sing the song naming the coaches, okay? Idolizing the coaches. But on the way to the game, there was obviously no headphones or whatever, music or anything, and there was no discussion. But you'd see everybody with their head down with a paper cup in their hand, and they would be sipping honey or blackstrap molasses for quick energy. And eighth period, the day of the game, you were in the gym, whether you had a class or not, you were in the gym with your feet up in the air, getting the lactic acid out.
So you didn't cramp.
Oh,
that's amazing. I think that's to me. This is I just love just hearing the stories and the experiences, and I mean, I think that's kind of all the questions I have. Do you have any final thoughts or comments before we kind of wrap this up?
No, I think this is really outstanding. I mean, I hope that a number of my players, Red's players, Ed's players, I'm not so sure any of chess players are still around, but hear and enjoy this.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's a good thing that you're doing, and
well, I think there's I think there's a story to be told, and I think your perspective, like I said before, it's just unique. And hopefully as we kind of do this maybe a little bit more, your ties, right? Your ties of meeting and talking to Chess McFee and the lineage all the way back. I think that for example, 5 undefeated teams in Chaney history, right?
Yes.
Okay. 1929, your dad's on that team. 96, you're coaching that team. 2000, you're coaching that team. So, your ties to all the things that have happened in one form or another, I think it's just interesting. And you know what? Whether people listen to it or don't listen to it, if there's a handful, I think that it's just historical. It's valuable. So
I have a gold football at home. My wife says it's gold plated, but whatever. I don't know. But it's a gold football that my dad left me. That says it has a red C on it, and it says undefeated, 1929. Obviously I'll give that to my son, and he'll give it to my grandson. So.
Yeah. So it's no, I appreciate it, and I think this is something good, and we'll do it again.
Sounds like a plan.
All right.